breakout session with a land acknowledgement. We at the Benyon Center acknowledge that the land on which we operate and which is named for the Ute tribe is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshu, and Ute tribes. We recognize and respect the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm that the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with the Native nations and urban Indian communities, the research, education, and community outreach activities. Additionally, I would like to go over some community agreements before I introduce our speaker. So the first one is we will be speaking in I statements. We will engage and contribute fully and genuinely. We will be purposeful and to the point, be conscious of sharing airtime with other participants, and lead with compassion and respect. And we will be creating an inclusive environment where everyone can thrive. As a quick reminder, this session will be recorded and uploaded to the Benyon Center conference website. If you are under the age of 18, please turn your camera off and provide only your first name. Otherwise, feel free to have your camera turned on or off during the rest of the session. With that being said, we are joined today by Dr. Carolina Antunes. Dr. Antunes is originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, but has lived in Salt Lake City since 2006. She holds a PhD in education from the Education, Culture, and Society Department at the University of Utah and is an assistant professor in the Division of Gender Studies in the same institution. Dr. Antunes develops participatory projects with young people in refugee immigrant backgrounds and after-school settings, and is interested in how radicalized and gendered readings of bodies mediate relationships in the educational system. I will now turn the time over to Dr. Antunes.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry for being late. I'm at a different time zone, and sometimes I get turned around with time zone. So I'm sorry about that. I thought we could start with the questions that I got from Megan about community engagement. So I thought we could start from there and then have more of a conversation than just me lecturing. So the topic of my talk is to talk about how to create meaningful relationships in community-based research. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit in the beginning about what I mean by meaningful relationships and what I mean by community engaged research. I'll talk for like 5 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation about it and go through the questions that Megan sent out. To me, community engaged research means more like a community driven research. I make the distinction. I feel like oftentimes when we talked about community-based research, we are talking about, people think about particular ways that research needs to be conducted. There are different sort of methodologies that people think about. Participatory research is one of those. But through my work with communities engaging in research, I have learned that in order to be really community based or community driven, that I need to be open to working in a way that works best for the community that I'm working with. So sometimes that means a more fully participatory process. And sometimes that means something that is like working on an issue that is identified by the community, but that I'm the one who is doing most of the research work because of a variety of different reasons, people's time constraints, ability to engage in the project, things like that. And so in order to get to a point where we understand what communities need, it's really important that we create relationships, right? And what that means to me, it's that I listen a lot, right? I spend a lot of time just going into communities and just listening to what people have to say and doing things that people need me to do, right? I feel like oftentimes as researchers, as university folks, we feel like there are some things that we are supposed to be doing and there are other things that we're not supposed to be doing. But that when we, but the reality is that if we do want to work with communities, we need to be willing to do whatever it is that they need us to do, right? And sometimes that means helping with childcare sometimes in an event. Sometimes that means helping with translating medical language to a more easy to understand English. Sometimes that means just being there to support people in lots of different ways. And to me, that's the foundation of any community-based work, is to really to be present and to be available for people. And I know that some of you may have come in today hoping that I was going to give you this sort of roadmap or steps on how to build those relationships. Like, do this, number one, you do this, number two, you do that, number three. But the reality is that each community is different, and you are all different people than I am. So the things that work for me will work in the communities that I work with will be different for you and for the people that you work with. But I think the really important point is to be present, like in your whole self, and to make sure that you are that you're engaging with members of the communities as like human beings and as full people, and that they get to see you as a full person as well, as opposed to just somebody who is a researcher or an academic, but somebody who is there, who is honestly there and present. So yeah, so let's open for questions and for comments.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them written down, and everyone please feel free to put some in the chat as we go along. So one of our first question is, how does community-based research facilitate longer lasting social change? And does that differ from the research that many of us are familiar with in just general academia?
Right. I think that one of the difference, the main difference to me between community-based research and traditional academic research is that community-based research is not a top-down approach to research. Oftentimes, and if you're familiar with the history of research and universities, you know that the university has a long history of doing harm through research, right? Like if we think about the ways in which researchers have entered communities, the ways in which that researchers have pillaged communities in the name of science. I am here. I'm in Portland, and I went to a museum yesterday to see, and they were having an exhibit of Egyptian collections, right? And always thinking about the ways in which these artifacts got removed from the culture and the place that created them, in order to, like, in the name of this like study, in the name of knowledge production. And there isn't a lot of input from people who live there about what should happen to these things, right? Where should they go? So that's a way to think of, like, that's how I think about traditional university research, is something that people that is top down, that doesn't take in considerations the needs of communities, and that we talk a lot sometimes about like flyby research, where researchers come in, collect data, take what they need, and then they leave, and people never hear back from what the results were, what the data, like what resulted from that data, right? So that's what traditional sort of research does. But community-based research is research that recognizes that communities have a wealth of knowledge, and that their experience are indispensable to understand what's happening on the ground, right? And so without taking those opinions in consideration, we really can't. It's not a full. We don't get a full perspective of any issue if we're not including community voices, right? So that is important. And I think, like I said, I like to think about community-driven research, because I like to think of it as being originated from communities, right? As opposed to originating from universities or academics who and then brought to the community, so the community can participate or discuss really the issues that are being discussed are originating from in the community. And then as researchers, as academics, we were there to facilitate the process and to help that research happen in whatever way the community thinks is best. But really, they're the ones highlighting the things that need to be researched, as opposed to us, right?
Okay, a little bit of a follow-up question to that. How do you, as a professor and a lecturer, kind of facilitate moving some of your students towards researching being more community-based versus just straight academic that some of us may be a little bit more used to?
I think one of the ways, I think it really depends. I teach a lot of different sort of level courses, right? And a lot of like some introductory courses, some upper division courses. And I think my approach to that is different in different levels. But to me, one of the, in my introductory courses, I really focus on, I use a variety of texts that aren't just academic texts, right? text produced by a variety of people, which I think helps students understand that academic knowledge doesn't necessarily come from one place or doesn't look one way. I also really like to create an environment in my classroom where students recognize that we're producing knowledge together, right? Like my classes are not often are not organized in a way like I lecture and people listen. It's not the way that I teach. And I think that when students start understanding that knowledge production isn't something that is top down, it's something that we can do together. For students who are starting out, I think that's a great way to get them to start to understand that even like that them as students are always teaching me things as well in the classroom. So I think that's one way. Another way that I do that is in my upper division classes is to always make sure that we are doing work that is community engaged, right? So making sure that students are always being able to relate what we're learning in classroom with what's happening in real life, and taking the knowledge that they get from the classroom and applying it to work in the community. A lot of the upper division classes that I teach are community engaged learning classes, right? They have the CL designation, which means that students are constantly doing that translation between what we learn in the classroom and how it applies in practice, right? In different spaces. So I think that is also a really important way that I think that students recognize that there is no a hard separation between what we do in the university and what's happening in our communities. I hope that answered your question. I feel like I went around, but
Yeah, no, that was great. One of our other questions is, can you give some examples of your community-based research and kind of what it looked like throughout the entire process of researching as well as writing?
yeah, so I think one important thing to remember about community-based research is that what you plan at the beginning and what you get at the end are often very, very different things. All research projects shift and change throughout their life, the time that they exist. But I think with community-based research, these things happen more. And I'll give you an example. So I've been working with a community center here in Salt Lake, in Mill Creek, and I've been developing sex and sexuality program for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders there. And the need for the course arose from the community. While I was working with the kids, we realized that there was a lot of information that the kids didn't have about puberty and about how their bodies were changing. And oftentimes when they did get this information, it was too late. Like things were already happening, right? Like girls were already had their first period and they didn't know what was going on. So we really recognized together that needed to sort of change. And so we did a first year and it was great. And we had students in 6th grade who were very excited about the course, very excited about participating. And the way that we envisioned the continuation of the program was that these students who were moving into 7th grade, which was outside of the age group that we would work with, that they would come back as peer mentors, right, and work with the kids and really start like building this start building their identity as like holders of knowledge within their community, people that the younger kids could come to and ask questions and ask for help, right? Somebody who could be a resource in the community. And we spent the whole summer working with the 7th grade kids to make sure that they were ready to be peer mentors, and worked with with the younger kids. And then the school year started. The bus route that brought students from the junior high into the center changed, and then the 7th grade kids could no longer be in the after school program because the bus route changed and they had no way to get there. So I think there are so many changes that happen in between, like things that you plan for, but because it's not just you, the project is not just about you, there's so many people involved. There are lots of different pieces that can change and move, and you have to be able to adapt, right, and to shift your plan from what you're doing. And I think that's one of the hardest things about community-based research. But thinking about like the way it starts to the way it ends, right? This particular project that I was talking about, its inception came from recognizing a need in the community, and we recognized that need together, right? I was there, and the kids and the staff at the community center, we all like sort of talked about it and realized that this is information that was really missing, and that the kids were like really wanted to know, right? Because they recognized that their bodies were changing, they were growing, and they didn't really understand what was going on. So really like the need for developing something that would give them this information came from the community. So that was how the project came to be, right? Like that was the inception. And then when we talk about like data analysis, I think there's two, for this particular project, there's two different things, right? There is what is important to me as a researcher is not necessarily what was important for the kids in the program and the staff in the community center as well. So making sure that the data would be able to serve everybody's purpose, just not mine, right? So that meant that the community, my community partner, the community center staff was able to use this data to apply for other funding, right? So when we were thinking about data collection, when we were thinking about data analysis, we really thought about what is it that you need to be able to continue to do this work? Because we know that for federal funding, state funding, right, you need to have certain measurements that don't necessarily mean a lot to me, but can mean a lot for the center staying open or not, right? So making sure that the data that we're collecting is not just something that serves me, but serves my community partner as well. And then also making sure that there's something in it for the kids. So one of the things that we did do is that with all of the terms that the kids learn and the information that they definitions of terms that they worked on, at the end of the first year program, we created a zine that they could take home that had all of the, right, like the artwork that they worked in, the definitions that they created as a group. So making sure that the data and the way the data that we're collecting and the way that we're disseminating this data or this information is a way that works for everybody involved, as opposed to just saying, yes, let's write articles about it, which is important too. But it's important to academics, but not necessarily for the community. Again, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Our next question is a little bit more towards the title of our presentation today. How does the relationship continue after you've done your research? You mentioned a little bit about the program that has started, that has given you, some of those key indicators, not only for the research, but also for the organization. But where do you see their programs kind of going from here after the research?
Yeah, so I strongly believe in relationships that exist past like whatever project, right? With the girls that were part of my the research that I did for my dissertation, I had we did a participatory action research project in a high school here in Utah, and we were looking at the ways in which Islamophobia materialized in their everyday lives. So I knew the girls who were working in the project with me before the participatory action research, and I still have relationships with them today. It's been 5 years since our collective, since we did our research work together, and they still call me when they need things, and we still go out to chat and catch up. So I think that if you're doing community based and community-driven research work, those relationships are relationships that last for a lifetime, right? In relation to the program that we are doing at the community center, I hope that we can get to a point where we can create a curriculum that works for the center, and that this curriculum can be self-sustaining, and that I won't necessarily need to be there, but that the work that we did there can continue to serve young people in the center and the center's goals long past a research project that we create something together that has a lasting impact. But I don't say that because I want to leave or end my relationship with the center and the community that they serve. It's just that once that capacity is developed to run that program, then we can move on to work on other things that that matter, or other issues that arise. I don't hope to eventually one day walk away and never see people again and just leave them with a curriculum that works, but just continue to build capacity for the community organization and for the community in a way that is growing, right? Like that we don't have to work on the same thing forever, and then we can change and work on other issues because this one problem will have been resolved, hopefully, right? So.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is, how can students get started in community-based research? Do you have any resources that you'd like to shout out and send to us, or any classes that you've taken while at the U that were really helpful in planning
Yeah, so this semester, I'm teaching the first class in gender studies is a community-based research class. In gender studies right now, it's a special topics class, but we're hoping that it's going to become a class in our catalog that we're going to offer once a year or once every 2 years. And in this class, students are working directly with organizations to develop a research project, right? So we have 3 community organizations who participate in the class. They come to class every time we meet, and students use a class time to really work with a community partner, learn about their organization, create relationships with key members of that organization, and really do that that relationship building, like that bridge building that we're talking about, really spending the semester learning how to do that. And the idea is that in the spring, they're gonna work then actually put the project in practice, right? That we spend fall developing relationships, spend fall working on the project, and then that spring, after students have had time to really learn from key players in the community organization about the work that they do and what their organization is about, that they can then really start to collect data and get to meet the people that they serve, and things like that. So I think that is one resource that that students can use. There are some other resources online, places that people can check out that have information, or that have like readings that people can get familiarized with. I'm part of a national organization called the Urban Research-Based Action Network, which is a national organization that has scholars, activists, artists that do community-based work. The website, the Urban website, has a lot of suggested readings. They have contacts of people who are doing this work across the country that people can check out as well. The Public Science Project in New York, they also have a huge list of resources, and they also publish the pieces of work that they developed with community. So they have some videos of that young people worked on after they've done research. So they have some like output products that people can look at, and that's also really it's a really helpful website as well. And here at the University of Utah, in partnership with the Bennion Center, the University Neighborhood Partners department created, published just this May, past May, a document that is called In It Together, and has a lot of it's sort of a guide for people who are starting out doing community research. It has 6 key points of what UNP and Bennion Center believe that, and the University of Utah in general believe that community-based research ought to be. They're sick, and then and then stories from faculty and community partners on how those work. I've been using that report with students this semester, undergraduate students, and my students really enjoyed the report. I think collectively the CRC did a really great job of writing a document that is easy to read and easy to use. So it doesn't feel like a super heavy academic text. So I think that's a great place for people who are starting out, who haven't done community-based research yet. That's a great place to start because from the feedback that I've gotten from my students, it's not an intimidating document. It's a document that is meant for it was meant for people who aren't into like academic jargon and language. So I think that's a great place to start. And I see that you all put the links on the chat. So thank you for that. So if people can follow the links there and access these resources.
So one of the aspects of the Benyon Scholars Program is creating a capstone project, which does start off with community-based research. And so my question is, how can we help students kind of continue building that relationship with their community partners while still getting the information necessary to start out their project? And what other resources can they be using outside of their community partners for best practices and other places that you would look to for when you're just finding research?
Yeah, so I think a really important thing to remember is that it's a partnership, right? So any community engaged work it's partnership work, and it's work that you're doing together, right? So I think it's really important that you all remember what you're bringing to the partnership, right? And remember that it's beneficial for both sides. So oftentimes we hear that the university has so much access to resources, so many resources that people don't have access to, right? So I think don't be afraid of doing, like, if you're working with a partner and you've identified what the issue is that you're working on together, don't be afraid of really digging into the literature, the academic literature, of what other people have found, even if these are not community-based work, because that's a strength that you bring into relation to that relationship, right? The ability to translate academic language to something that your partners can understand and use. That's a strength that you bring to the partnership. So I think do use the resources that the university have, use the databases, use the library, use the librarians to find information about those topics, because that is resources, those are strengths that you bring to a relationship that community partners are lacking, right? So don't be afraid of coming to your partner and saying, here's what I found, what other people doing research in this topic found, right? This is how we can, this is what's out there in academic research. This is how we can use it to move our project forward together. I think sometimes people think that when you're doing community-based research that that should be completely divorced from traditional academic things like articles or literature review or things like that. And I think I really think it's important for students to recognize that this, like, the opportunity to have access to these resources and to translate that information to partners is a skill that you all have, and that is so important to your partners. So that is a place that that's the first place where you should start doing your research, because that's information that you have and they don't. And I think that it's something that you can add to the relationship, something important that you can add to the relationship.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna open it up once again to everyone else in here. If you have any questions for Dr. Antunes, please feel free to either type them in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, Hiram, thank you for your question. So it says knowledge production isn't top down. How can people who are ingrained in society, who ignore social interactions between each other, what specific methods can be? I'm not sure. So how can we get people who ignore social interactions with each other to recognize that knowledge production isn't top down? Is that what the question is? Yes, okay. So I think that's a good question. And I think I even in academia, I think sometimes that's an issue that we run into. There's still a lot of people at the university level who feel like the knowledge, community-based research or community-produced knowledge isn't as rigorous or as important or as valid as what is constructed in the university, right? There are a ton of scholars who have written really deeply about that. Ben Kishner is one from University of Colorado. He has a really, and I, if you send me an email, I can send you the citations exactly. I don't remember the name of the article, but he talks about the importance of the learning process for all of those involved in the research, right? So Ben Kirshner, and then Patty Lather also talks about that. So there's a lot of people who have been writing about this for quite some time, but yet a lot of people in academia still don't recognize that as valid knowledge. And like, we've been trying some of the work that the Benyon Center and the University Neighborhood Partners is doing, both here in Utah and with the University of Utah, but also with other higher ed institutions, is to we've been trying, right, like with other people who do this kind of work, trying to really show people that this is rigorous and important work. I don't necessarily I'm not sure I have an answer for your question. I wish I did, because I also would like people to recognize that a community experience and community knowledge is very valuable. But I think all we can do is to continue to work with communities and to create space for communities. I think hopefully people will start notice that the best solutions for issues are community driven, right? The communities who are living those problems every day, they know how to. They're the best ones to solve problems. And then you talk about specific methods. The amazing thing about community-based research or community-driven research is that you can use almost any method that you want. Like I said, at the Public Science Project, Brett Stout is somebody who does quantitative research. So he does participatory surveys, and he works with communities to do quantitative data analysis, which is amazing. So you could do quantitative work, you can do hardcore like sociological survey data, you can do qualitative methods, interviews, focus groups. I'm really passionate about arts-based research. I love using arts as a method for data collection. I think it's a great way to engage communities, but you can use so many methods. All methods can be participatory, as just really thinking about how to engage the community that you're working with in it. But any method can be participatory. And then how can academic research be better connected? When I read this question, what I think about is how can we make sure that more people are getting access to academic research? And I think that to me, the answer to this question is thinking about result dissemination outside of article writing, right? Because articles are great. And as a faculty, I know that I have to write articles to keep my job, right? But I also know that very few people are reading what I'm writing, right? But if I want people to know the amazing work that communities are doing, then I have to think of other ways to disseminate this knowledge, right? Like I said, the Public Science Project, if you go to the website, they have videos, little documentaries that they've done that they can use. Like I said, also, I use a lot of arts-based methods. A work that I just finished with the Youth Voices group, participatory action research group that we have at UNP. And then I'm here to talk about in this conference. We're gonna, the art work that they produce is gonna be in an exhibition at the library, the Marriott Library for spring semester. So thinking about, other ways that we can get people access to the information that we generate that isn't through articles, because I mean, even I love research and I love what I do, but I don't read articles for fun, right? But I will go to see an exhibit at the library for fun. And I also thinking about that. I don't know if you've all seen. There is a play called Notes from the Field. It's a play that is available on HBO if you have it. So it's a researcher, a woman who worked for the Obama administration, and she spent years researching the school to prison pipeline. She interviewed students, she interviewed principals, she interviewed people who worked in detention centers for young people, police officers, all sorts. She interviewed like 300 people about the school to prison pipeline, and she created display where she acts all the roles, and so she's also an amazing actor, but that is a dissemination of her results. So the play is the outcome of this like 3-year long research process that she did on the school to prison pipeline. So it's an amazing example of like getting people access to research in a different way, right? How many hundreds of thousands of people saw this play either live or on HBO that wouldn't have seen it, wouldn't have read the article if she just wrote it in an article, right? So to me, I think that's the key to making sure that academic research is better connected. And tell me if that's not what you meant by that question, but that's how I understand it.
Awesome. If there aren't any more questions, I would just like to thank Dr. Antunes again. And just as a reminder that there will be an email that is going to be sent out with a survey on how we can better inform the committees over the Bennion Scholars Conference every year. Your feedback is very important to us. And again, I'd just like to thank Dr. Antunes for their time spent with us today and answering all of our questions.
And I also wanted to apologize one more time for my time zone confusion. So thank you for being patient and for sticking it out and listening to what I had to say.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.